Anytime you're ready.
All right, come on.
We are talking Deathstalker 4, Match of Titans, the fourth and final in the Deathstalker franchise, 1991. This one sees the return of Rick Hill, who played Deathstalker in the first film, written and directed by Howard R. Cohen. Now, it's been a long time since I've seen this movie, and I've just rewatched it for this review. And I always remember this as being the kind of the worst out of the Deathstalker films, but upon watching it now, I actually didn't think it was, in comparatively speaking, all that bad. I actually quite enjoyed watching it again, I must say. So not quite as bad as I thought, but let's just go for a little bit of the plot here, and we'll kind of go into what I actually thought about the film in a little bit more of a critical detail. Now, the story is somewhat kind of small scale compared to a lot of these films. Ultimately, it focuses on Deathstalker as he is trying to find a friend of his that has, ultimately their swords have got mixed up, and he kind of wants to swap his, get his original sword back. But does in actual fact call back to earlier movies where it's, you know, enchanted, etc. On the way, he kind of rescues a female warrior played by Maria Ford, and they end up in this kind of particular castle where a contest is being held. However, the kind of the ruling queen of this castle may have nefarious plans to ultimately try and get all of the kind of the best warriors of the realm and turn them into statue sort of stone men for her army, and that's basically your plot. So let's talk about Deathstalker 4. And the interesting thing here, if you the first Deathstalker takes itself quite seriously, and then the kind of the second and the third one kind of like has a lot more of a comedy element. But this one kind of retains that, so it's a little bit more light-hearted, a little bit more kind of has a few jokes in it, but it's kind of quite so it's quite different from Rick Hill's first interpretation of Deathstalker. There are some quite funny scenes actually that involve this other warrior that kind of Deathstalker becomes sort of friendly with, who is like essentially like a Boy Scout, doesn't drink, doesn't have sex, anything like that, and it's quite funny where he's trying to teach him how to seduce a woman. There's some sort of quite funny scenes there. I've got to say that I did actually find legitimately amusing. I thought Maria Ford does make for quite a good little kind of sidekick here, kind of like a female love interest / sidekick. I wasn't too familiar with Maria Ford actually, and I had a look at her kind of like credits, obviously once I was doing sort of after I finished watching this movie. And she was born, I think, in '66, so she'd be in her kind of mid-50s now. But looking at her pictures now, it looks like she's one of these people who have gone OTT with the kind of like been addicted to plastic surgery and things like that, which is a little bit of a shame because she's got that stretched face look, if you know what I mean. Anyway, so the main thing with this film, I think, is you have to talk about is the amount of stock footage that it uses. And this is the real negative of this one, compared to really any other kind of like sword and sorcery movie that come out of Roger Corman's kind of catalogue. This one by far and away probably uses the most, and I would say there's even probably like a fifth of the footage that you see is actually footage from other films, which is a bit of a shame, to be honest, because it just takes so much. And then we have these extended scenes which are from other Deathstalker films, from Sorceress, from Amazons, so much of it. And they're clearly from different films ultimately, so it just becomes a little bit unfortunate. The other bad thing about this movie is the terrible music, the horrible choice of this weird little kind of jazzy music that doesn't fit the kind of the actual theme of the kind of the actual movie itself. It's very silly. The actual fighting, there's a mix of. I think with Rick Hill, actually, there are a couple of fun fight scenes, and Rick Hill's actually quite charismatic. He has the kind of like this little signature move that he does, where he kind of wipes the blood off his his sword and stuff like that. And there are a couple of reasonable fight scenes with him. However, fight scenes that are involving other people, particularly the female cast, are shockingly poor. The actual stone people themselves really are a little bit disappointing when we come down to it. We're led to believe that they're this unstoppable army, but ultimately they just seem to be a bit of a crap idea in the first place, and you wonder why the Queen didn't just hire mercenaries and things like that. So the whole plot just falls apart a little bit. It's a little bit more fun than I remember, I will say this. I mean, I remember not liking this as much as the kind of the other Deathstalker movies. But upon watching it now, I think maybe I kind of appreciate some of the kind of the more schlocky elements of it, maybe a little bit more than I kind of did back then. And I quite like, I quite like Rick Hill's portrayal of Deathstalker, maybe even more than the first movie. So there are some fun here. There's some fun elements in regards to these cat people that seem to permeate this movie. Obviously, it looks ridiculous, but they're quite fun. And there are quite a lot of action sequences, although a lot of them, like I've said, are ported over from other films. So overall, but this is no means a good movie, but I actually still had a little bit more fun than I thought I would do with it. Having rewatched it for this review, I'll actually give this one a 4 out of 10. So it doesn't sound like a great score, but I was expecting to give this one like a 2 or a 3, having kind of remembering it not being very good. But it's actually a little bit more fun than I remember. So if you like your kind of schlocky fantasy films, obviously I feel that there are worse examples, believe it or not, and I actually thought this was more fun than I remember, but it's still realistically a bit of a crappy production ultimately. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? And what's your favourite Deathstalker film? Leave me a comment. I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.